Chapter 1. Miss Sterling, are you certain you want to release these photos and videos of Mr. Lockwood and Miss Vance on the day of the wedding? Nina Sterling paused for a moment before answering firmly. I'm cert. Oh, and please handle my visa application. I'm leaving the country on the wedding day. Don't let anyone know. The person on the other end of the line responded immediately. Of course, Miss Sterling. I'll get right on it. After hanging up, Nina stood in the room for a long time. She hadn't originally planned to take things this far. Not until she discovered that Ethan Lockwood had a secret home on the side. And the woman he had hidden away was the one who had hurt him the most. His first love, Valerie Vance. Just that morning, Nina had received an address from a private investigator. Following it, she arrived at a villa in a remote area, yet decorated with incredible warmth. If you can't bear for me to get married, then crash the wedding in a month and steal me away. Valerie, if you dare to show up on the wedding day, I dare to marry you. Nina had just reached the door when she heard her own fiancé say such words to another woman. Inside, the woman froze for a second, then threw herself into his arms, vowing, all right. On the day of the wedding, I will personally snatch you back from Nina Sterling. Hearing Valerie's words, Ethan's eyes instantly welled up with emotion. The next second, the two were caught in a passionate kiss. Nina watched the scene from outside the door, her heart feeling like it was about to explode. Ethan was such a masterful liar, so much so that she had believed his vow of one true love for a lifetime when he proposed. Only now did she realize this was the secret home he shared with his first love, Valerie. Nina fought the urge to push the door open and instead turned and walked away. In that instant, she secretly made a decision that would shock everyone. At the wedding a month from now, before they could execute their plan to crash it, she would jilt him at the altar. Nina didn't drive. She walked all the way home. The Sterling family maid was horrified to see her looking like she'd been caught in a storm. She quickly ushered Nina inside to warm up, fumbling to pour her a cup of hot water. Miss, why did you go out without a thicker coat? If you catch a cold, Mr. Lockwood will be furious, but Nina seemed numb, walking back to her room without a word. The moment the door closed, Nina clutched her chest and slowly slid to the floor. All this time, she had never doubted Ethan's love for her. He would travel to South America to personally craft a bespoke, all-diamond bracelet for her, just because she'd mentioned she liked one. He had unhesitatingly flipped a table and torn up a multi-million-dollar contract because someone had forced Nina to drink 2 extra glasses of wine. A CEO who had weathered countless storms in the business world had willingly humbled himself to propose to her, his hands trembling with nervousness at the proposal. After the proposal was accepted, all the prominent families in Seaport City were eagerly awaiting their wedding of the century in a month's time, but only Nina knew it would never happen. Because Ethan had cheated. She had originally come here today wanting to sit down and talk things through with Ethan, but she never expected to overhear something so devastating. Crash the wedding? What did Ethan take her for? And what about the Sterling family's reputation? Nina caressed the engagement ring on her finger and slowly closed her eyes. She thought, if there was no wedding at all, how would Ethan let Valerie crash it? And what she had to do was, before this wedding-crashing plot could unfold, jilt him in front of everyone. At the wedding a month from now, she would disappear from Ethan Lockwood's world completely, and she would give him a gift he would never, ever forget. Chapter 2. It wasn't until late at night that Ethan Lockwood rushed home. Without even changing his clothes, he hurried over to embrace Nina, apologizing, I'm so sorry, Nina. I had a meeting with a client and got back late. The next second, he saw the untouched food on the table. Why didn't you eat? Is the food not to your liking? Nina shook her head, subtly moving a little farther away from him. The sickly sweet perfume on him, a scent not her own, was making her dizzy and nauseous. Ethan didn't notice her strange behavior. He just smiled helplessly, pulled out a chair beside Nina, and placed a shrimp on her plate. I've been swamped with work at the company lately, so I might not be able to have meals with you. Don't starve yourself. As he leaned over, Nina saw a faint reddish mark on his collar. Her stomach churned, and she struggled to suppress the urge to vomit. There was a time when Ethan had thrown a fit multiple times because she had forgotten to eat with him. The worst time, he had even shed tears, feeling wronged. He once said that life was short, and he didn't want to miss a single meal with Nina. But now, he was the one who had forgotten that promise first. Nina looked at the shrimp in her bowl and smiled bitterly. When did Ethan become like this? It probably started around their engagement 2 months ago. That day, Ethan had been uncharacteristically distracted. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, yet he was glued to his phone the entire time, looking something up. Nina had tried to speak to him several times, but he hadn't heard a word. He even left early after taking a call, leaving Nina to face their embarrassed parents alone. Later, Nina found out that it was the day Valerie Vance returned to the country, the woman who had brought Ethan both love and hate, the one with whom he was so entangled. 4 years ago, deceived by Valerie's sweet talk, Ethan had invested nearly his entire fortune into a major project, she described. What he got in return was Valerie running off with the money and disappearing abroad. The business partners, unable to find Valerie, all came to the Lockwood family demanding answers. That was the most difficult period of Ethan's life. The corporation was on the verge of bankruptcy, and facing immense pressure from his parents and all sides, he had even contemplated suicide. But just as Ethan was standing on the edge of a bridge, about to jump, it was Nina who rushed over, risking her own life to hold him back. Later, Nina injected capital into Lockwood Industries. She worked day and night alongside Ethan to turn the tide, helping Lockwood Industries become the top corporation in Seaport City. From that point on, Ethan had seemingly put aside his love for Valerie, pouring all his passion onto Nina. It took him a year to win her over, and another 3 to finally get her to accept his proposal. But all of that changed after Valerie came back. Now, Ethan had even concocted the idea of letting Valerie crash their wedding. At this thought, Nina spoke coolly, "No, thank you. I have no appetite and I don't eat shrimp." Ethan froze, especially after meeting Nina's eyes, which were as still and lifeless as a stagnant pool. How could he have forgotten? Nina never ate seafood. Even a single bite would make her sick. He suddenly felt a pang of guilt and loudly called for the sleeping maid. "Didn't I say no seafood in this house? What is wrong with you people?" The maid was instantly wide awake and hurried to explain, "Mr. Lockwood, didn't you have these shrimp delivered specifically? You even instructed that they be eaten while fresh, so I—" Ethan's eyes widened. "Why would I have seafood sent to the house?" But then, he seemed to remember something, and his gaze flickered. The maid immediately picked up the plate of shrimp to throw it away but was stopped by Nina's raised hand. "Forget it. Let's not waste food. Pack them up and freeze them." Then, she turned to Ethan. "You can take them to the office tomorrow. I'm sure someone there will enjoy them." The maid, unsure of what to do, looked at Ethan. A sense of panic welled up in Ethan's heart. He quickly grabbed Nina's hand. "Nina, what's wrong? I thought you didn't like shrimp." "I don't. That's why it's a bonus for the employees. They've been working so much overtime lately, and these shrimp are quite expensive." Nina's explanation was seamless. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief. "You're always so considerate, Nina. Pack them up." "Yes, Mr. Lockwood. How could he be so good at faking it?" Nina silently watched him pack everything up himself, even sticking a note on it that read, "A treat for my loving wife, Nina." "Ethan," she thought, "I hope when you receive this gift, you'll be able to keep up this act just as well as you are now." Chapter 3, tossing and turning in the middle of the night, Nina felt a tightness in her chest that kept sleep at bay. Just then, her phone on the nightstand lit up. She swiped the screen open. As expected, a message from that familiar account had arrived. It was a few screenshots of a chat log, the avatars cropped out. The text, as always, was intimate. It didn't take a genius to know it was Valerie, deliberately sending her chat records with Ethan. This had been going on for 2 months. Nina tapped on Valerie's profile picture and went to her social media feed. The latest post was from 2 hours ago. "Adopted an adorable baby with my love today." The picture was of a cat. Ethan had always loved cats. Even his profile picture was one. But unfortunately, Nina was severely allergic to cat fur, so they could never have one at home. To think he'd just gone and adopted one with Valerie. Valerie's post was a thinly veiled suggestion that only she could give Ethan the cozy little home he dreamed of, 2 people and a cat. Nina stared at Valerie's feed until the screen's glare made her eyes ache before she put the phone down. Ethan was sleeping right beside her, yet an unbridgeable chasm had opened between their hearts. In the middle of the night, Nina was jolted awake by a sharp pain. She had always had stomach problems, and combined with not eating much and the day's intense emotional turmoil, her stomach now felt like it was being twisted by knives. She reached for the lamp and accidentally knocked over the water glass on the table. The noise startled Ethan awake. He immediately noticed the woman beside him, curled up in pain. He quickly turned on the light and was terrified to see Nina's face covered in sweat. "Nina, what's wrong? Is your stomach acting up again?" "The medicine. It's in the drawer," she managed to say. Hearing Nina's weak voice, Ethan scrambled out of bed and frantically rummaged through the drawer. Just then, his phone started ringing. Ethan was already agitated from being unable to find the medicine, and the incessant ringing only made it worse. Finally, in frustration, he snatched the phone and answered. "Who is it? What's going on? Whatever it is, don't bother me right now, got it?" Just as he was about to angrily hang up, he heard sobbing from the other end, and his hand froze. Nina could faintly hear a woman's delicate voice on the phone. "Ethan, Snowball is missing. I've looked everywhere around here and can't find him. It's all my fault for not looking after him. He's so small, so fragile. If anything happens to him, I don't want to live anymore. No, don't panic. I'm sure he'll be fine." Ethan's expression immediately turned anxious. He glanced at Nina, then covered the phone's mouthpiece and walked out of the room, his voice dropping to a whisper. "It's so late. It's not safe for you to be looking for a cat alone. Give me 5 minutes, I'll be right there." A moment later, Ethan rushed back into the room, grabbed a jacket, and threw it on. He told Nina there was a sudden emergency at the office and left without a second glance. Nina was in too much pain to even speak. She could only watch as Ethan's back grew smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely. The dull ache in her heart now felt even worse than the stabbing pain in her stomach. In the end, Nina had to drag herself out of bed to find the medicine. But she lost her footing, fell off the bed, and lay on the floor, gradually losing consciousness. Nina woke up in a hospital. A young nurse, about to start her IV drip, saw her open her eyes and looked as excited as if she'd seen a savior. "You're finally awake. Mr. Lockwood spared no expense to treat you. He was throwing a huge fit at the hospital when you were unconscious for so long." The nurse's tone was filled with envy. But Nina could only manage a difficult, bitter smile. She was laughing at herself. Laughing at how she had once risked her health, drinking herself sick to help a desperate Ethan with business socializing, leaving her with chronic stomach problems. And now, in Ethan's heart, she was worth less than his ex-girlfriend's cat. Nina disliked the pungent smell of disinfectant in the hospital room. She pushed herself up and walked out of the room. She hadn't taken more than a few steps when she saw a familiar figure pass by in the distance. Her heart tightened and she quietly followed him. The next second, she saw Ethan hiding in the stairwell, secretly on the phone. He was chuckling, his voice laced with a helpless, doting tone. "No, I really can't get away right now. She hasn't woken up yet. Don't worry, I'll definitely make time to see you. It won't be long." After hearing something from the other end, Ethan's face broke into a smile, revealing a pair of faint dimples. His voice was sticky sweet. "I know I miss you too. Okay, see you later." After hanging up, Ethan frowned slightly. He felt as if a pair of eyes had been fixed on him from behind. But he turned to check several times, and the stairwell was empty. Chapter 4, upon learning that Nina was awake, Ethan finally showed a pleasant face to the hospital staff. He meticulously wrote down all the doctor's instructions in his phone's notes app, and repeatedly confirmed with the doctor that Nina was out of danger, before he felt at ease enough to handle her discharge. Ethan drove, seeming to be in a good mood. "Nina, my assistant said your wedding dress is ready. Shall we go take a look together?" Nina, however, was emotionless. She coolly lifted her eyelids, and after a long silence, she softly said, "All right." Receiving her permission, Ethan's smile deepened, and he gradually accelerated. "I've always wanted to see you in a wedding dress. Besides, today is the designer's last day in Seaport City. If there are any issues, it'll be convenient to get them altered. Nina, in less than a month, I'll be marrying you. We're finally getting our happy ending." He mused to himself, letting out a sigh of contentment now and then. Nina just stared quietly out the window, unable to even feign a smile. She wanted to know, "Ethan, are you truly happy? The person you really want to spend the rest of your life with, is it me, or is it Valerie?" A sudden ringtone broke Nina's train of thought. Ethan casually put the call on speaker. "What is it?" His secretary's voice was urgent. CEO Lockwood, you need to come to the office quickly. Miss Vance is in trouble. Ethan's face changed. He violently turned the steering wheel, changing lanes, and floored the accelerator, speeding towards the office. The force of inertia threw Nina forward, only to be yanked back by the seatbelt, her back slamming against the seat. She felt a wave of nausea, her barely recovered body protesting. A drive that should have taken half an hour, Ethan completed in less than 10 minutes. He quickly parked the car and rushed towards the office building without stopping. It wasn't until he was in the elevator that he noticed Nina's pale face behind him. Nina, there's an emergency at the office I need to handle. Why don't you wait for me in my office? Nina, pale-faced, shook her head. Before she could speak, the elevator doors opened. Ethan, no longer paying her any mind, strode towards the conference room. Pushing the door open, he saw Valerie, her fists clenched in anger, confronting a group of senior executives alone. One of the executives slammed Valerie's project proposal onto the table. I spit on this, what doctorate from abroad. You haven't produced a single result in all these years. You're nothing but a kept woman riding on CEO Lockwood's coattails. What gives you the right to order us around for this project of yours? The others let out a series of low chuckles. Enough, a furious shout cut them off. Seeing Ethan arrive, Valerie's eyes instantly turned red. Ethan, furious, rushed forward and pulled Valerie behind him, glaring at the executives. Valerie is my hire. If you have a problem with that, come to me. What kind of skill is it to bully a newcomer? Besides, he shifted his tone, who says Valerie hasn't achieved anything? The patent the company is currently applying for was her sole responsibility. At these words, everyone present was in an uproar. The executives whispered among themselves, clearly not expecting Valerie to have made such a significant contribution. Valerie was just as surprised, looking at Ethan with slightly reddened eyes. Ethan gave her a reassuring look. Don't worry. As long as I'm here, no one will dare to look down on you. Nina stood at the doorway, her fingers gripping the doorframe so tightly she wouldn't collapse. She never imagined that the secret research project she had pulled countless all-nighters to complete would be credited to Valerie by Ethan, just like that. She opened her mouth but had barely uttered a syllable before Ethan, quick as a flash, pulled her out of the room. Nina, I'm sorry, you saw the situation in there. This was the only way I could help her establish a foothold in the company. Nina's voice was hoarse. Are you sure you want to do this? This is just a temporary measure. I promise I'll make it up to you later. Nina managed a pained smile and said indifferently, Don't bother. Don't bother, because they no longer had a future. Chapter 5. After leaving the company, Ethan glanced at the sky and suggested they could still make it to try on the wedding dress. But Nina had long since lost the mood. Suddenly, a furious shout caught their attention. In broad daylight, an attacker with a knife leaped out, viciously pointing the blade at Nina. You're Ethan Lockwood's kept woman, aren't you? You ruined my life today. I'm going to kill you with my own hands. With that, he lunged at Nina with the knife. No, in that life or death moment, Ethan instinctively threw himself in front of Nina, taking the blow with his own body. As the sound of the blade piercing flesh rang out, blood spurted everywhere. Ethan clutched his stomach, collapsing to the ground in agony. The attacker, seeing the scene, panicked. He dropped the knife and fled. Nina's breath hitched. She trembled as she tried to help the man on the ground. Blood was still pouring from Ethan's wound, but as if he felt no pain, his eyes were fixed on Nina. Nina, as long as you're okay. Nina quickly dialed 911 and escorted him all the way to the emergency room. She didn't understand. Didn't Ethan love Valerie so much he was willing to let her crash their wedding? Yet now he had risked his life to save her. What was this all about? 3 hours later, the doors to the operating room opened again. A weary doctor walked out, slowly removing his gloves and mask. Thankfully, the blade missed his vital organs by a few inches, but he lost a lot of blood and needs plenty of rest. Hearing this, both Nina and the secretary, who had rushed over after getting the news, breathed a sigh of relief. The secretary couldn't help but marvel. Miss Nina, CEO Lockwood really put his life on the line for you this time. He must love you to the bone. To this, Nina remained silent. She used to believe that Ethan loved her with his life, but then he transferred that love to someone else. Yet in the face of danger, Ethan's instinctive reaction had once again blurred her perception of him. Her heart was small. It could only hold one Ethan Lockwood. But what about him? How many people could his heart hold? Nina lowered her gaze. This cheap, divisible love was something she, Nina Sterling, would never accept. After the anesthesia wore off, Ethan created a scene, demanding to see Nina. Ignoring the nurse's advice, he pulled out his IV needle and stumbled out of bed. He collided right into Nina, who was returning with a bowl of porridge. He hugged her waist tightly, his voice filled with terror. "Nina, thank goodness you're okay. Do you know how scared I was of losing you when that knife came at us?" Nina calmly pushed his hands away. "The doctor said you need to rest. Don't move around." Seeing her, Ethan seemed to have taken a calming pill. He obediently lay back on the bed and even let the nurse reinsert his IV. When Ethan saw that Nina had brought porridge, he smiled. "Nina, I'm all wrapped in bandages. It's not convenient for me to eat." Nina sighed softly, opened the container, and began to feed him the porridge. After finishing, he leaned against her affectionately, holding her hand tightly. "Nina, while I was unconscious, I had a terrible nightmare. I dreamed that you left me. I was so scared I woke up and my first instinct was to find you. But thankfully, it was just a nightmare. Nina, you'll always be by my side, right?" He looked up, his eyes fixed on her without blinking. Chapter 6, Nina fell silent. She turned her head, trying to avoid the question. But Ethan was unusually persistent. "Nina, why aren't you talking? Answer me, right?" Just then, his secretary appeared with a stack of documents. "CEO Lockwood, we've investigated the attacker's identity and motive from yesterday. Please take a look." Hearing this, Ethan sat up straight, a flicker of ruthlessness in his eyes. He silently took the file and began to read. Something in the report made his expression change drastically, his breathing quickening. His voice trembled slightly. "Quick, gather the bodyguards immediately." After hastily giving this order, he pulled out his IV needle again and, without even a glance at Nina beside him, rushed out of the hospital. Puzzled, Nina looked at the file Ethan had dropped on the floor and bent down to pick it up. As she read through the contents, her hands began to tremble uncontrollably. When she saw that particular name in the file, everything became clear. No wonder Ethan had been in such a panic. It was because of Valerie again. The attacker's initial target had never been her. It was Valerie. Valerie had been communicating with external parties as Ethan's assistant, but had botched several projects due to her incompetence. This attacker was a victim of one of those failed projects. So when he came to the Lockwood Industries building, he had naturally mistaken Nina, who was standing beside Ethan, for Valerie. And the reason Ethan was so frantic was that he feared the attacker, upon realizing he'd targeted the wrong person, would go after Valerie again. And what about her? Wasn't Ethan afraid the attacker might come after her again? Perhaps it was because he simply didn't care. For the next full week, Ethan didn't come home. Nina discovered that he had reassigned all the bodyguards, even the security personnel from the company building, to protect Valerie. At the same time, Ethan spent a fortune hiring private investigators to track down the attacker. Nina had never imagined that the usually calm and collected Ethan would go to such lengths for someone's safety. This blatant favoritism led many in the know to cast curious glances at Nina, the official fiancé. A week later, Nina saw in the newspaper that the attacker had been apprehended. That evening, a weary Ethan finally came home. He wrapped his arms around Nina's waist from behind. "Nina, don't move. Just let me hold you for a bit." Nina smelled the lady's perfume on him and her stomach churned. She asked dryly, "Ethan, do you still love me?" Ethan's movement stiffened, and a sudden, inexplicable panic washed over him. He nuzzled her neck with his head, holding her even tighter. "Don't overthink things. If I didn't love you, why would I marry you? Nina, in less than 10 days, I can announce to the whole world that you are mine." With the wedding approaching, Ethan began to gradually step back from his work. Every day, besides overseeing the wedding venue decorations, he stayed by Nina's side, never leaving her. One night, Ethan went to take a shower, leaving his phone on the bedside table. Nina was looking for her passport when she glanced up and saw Ethan's phone light up. She inadvertently saw the message on the screen. It was from Valerie. "Ethan, I'm standing outside your house right now. I have to see you today, rain or shine." Nina frowned slightly. She unlocked Ethan's phone and scrolled up, noticing that he hadn't replied much to Valerie's messages recently. Ethan had been with her constantly for the past 2 days. It seemed Valerie was getting anxious. She put the phone down, marking the message as unread. Chapter 7. Ethan came out of the bathroom, drying his hair while talking to Nina about the wedding arrangements. He casually picked up his phone to check it, and his words trailed off. Nina asked, "Why did you stop?" He quickly put his phone away and calmly continued talking about the wedding, but his eyes kept darting towards the window. "It's getting late. Let's get some rest." Nina turned off the light. At the same moment, a flash of lightning lit up the sky outside. It was followed by a sudden, torrential downpour. Nina instinctively shrank closer to Ethan. She was usually brave, but she was terrified of thunder. After learning this, Ethan had once held her and solemnly promised that he would never let her face a thunderstorm alone. But now, Ethan's mind was clearly elsewhere. He didn't notice Nina's small movement, nor did he remember her fear of thunder. Within 5 seconds of hearing the rain, he shot out of bed and rushed out of the house without a word. Nina curled up on the bed, pressing her hands tightly over her ears. In that moment, her heart felt as if it had been shattered by the thunder outside and washed away by the storm. That night, Ethan didn't come back at all. The next morning, woken by her alarm, Nina dragged her tired body out of bed. Today was the day she had to go get her visa. She knew that with Ethan's resources, even if she ran away from the wedding, she couldn't guarantee he wouldn't pursue her. It was better to plan her post-jilting itinerary in advance. She planned to travel abroad to clear her head and attend a research conference she had missed several times. After getting her visa, Nina returned home and felt that something was off in the air. She sneezed several times in a row, and her throat felt dry and itchy. Just then, she heard a cat meow. Nina looked down and saw a cat under the coffee table. She felt as if she were facing a mortal enemy, stumbling back several steps. She was severely allergic to cat fur, to the point of respiratory failure. Nina immediately felt it becoming hard to breathe, but the cat seemed to like her and approached without any awareness of her distress. Nina flailed her hands in the air, trying to keep the cat away, but to little effect. Her chest heaved violently, but she felt like she couldn't draw in enough air. In a state of confusion, she shattered a glass from the table beside her, hoping to scare the cat away. It worked to some extent. The cat let out a sharp cry and retreated to a corner, trembling. Nina leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. At the same time, the front door opened again, and Ethan rushed in frantically. However, his first reaction wasn't to check on Nina's well-being. Instead, he carefully ran over and picked up the cat. "What are you doing? This cat is so small. Even if you don't like it, you can't scare it like that." Nina's vision was turning black, and she could barely make out Ethan's voice. She crawled to the doorway, weakly breathing in the fresh air from outside, but the tightness in her chest didn't ease much. After a while, she forced herself to speak through the raw, stinging pain in her throat, asking Ethan, "Ethan, I'm allergic to cat fur. It can be fatal. Have you forgotten?" Her words hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. His mind went blank for a moment. Then, his face contorted with terror. He had seen how severe Nina's allergic reactions could be. Not only would she break out in a rash all over her body, but it could also trigger respiratory failure, even posing a risk of suffocation. How could he have forgotten something so important? Chapter 8. The more concerned Ethan had once been for Nina, the more remorseful he was now. The cat in his arms felt as heavy as lead. Ethan quickly put it down and frantically searched for Nina's medicine. After using her inhaler, Nina's complexion finally eased a little. Ethan carefully helped her to the bed to rest. "I'm sorry, Nina. I misunderstood you just now. That cat belongs to Valerie. She was going crazy looking for it everywhere, so I was a bit anxious." Nina remained silent, her face expressionless as she looked at Ethan. Under her calm gaze, Ethan felt increasingly guilty. He quickly made an excuse to make a phone call and left the room. A moment later, Nina faintly heard voices from outside the room. "Don't say another word. Just come and get your cat." For the next few days, Ethan took meticulous, hands-on care of Nina. A single cough from her would make him extremely nervous. He even suggested postponing the wedding, proposing a grander celebration once Nina had fully recovered. Nina firmly refused. "I'm fine. The wedding can proceed as scheduled." Seeing how much Nina cared about the wedding, Ethan felt a warmth spread through his heart. 2 days later, Valerie came to apologize, carrying a basket of fruit. "I'm sorry, Nina. It's all my fault for not watching the cat properly. I'm so sorry you had an attack." She appeared incredibly guilty, her eyes red and swollen from crying. But Ethan was not swayed. His voice was icy. "Valerie, do you have any idea that your carelessness nearly cost Nina her life?" Valerie choked up. "I'm sorry, I really didn't think something like this would happen, Enough, you don't need to say any more. Just remember this. Nina is my bottom line. Her safety is more important than anything else." Valerie froze, staring blankly at Ethan, forgetting to even continue her defense. Within 2 seconds, large tears rolled down her cheeks. She trembled, turned, and ran out, sobbing. Ethan stood up, somewhat shocked by Valerie's reaction. Without hesitation, he chased after her. All of this happened in less than half a minute. But to Nina, it felt like a scene she had experienced 1,000 times before. She pondered for a moment, then quietly followed them. From the villa's back garden came Valerie's sobs, mingled with Ethan's helpless, soft reassurances. Nina watched with her own eyes as Ethan tenderly wiped away Valerie's tears. The next second, he hooked an arm around Valerie's waist and kissed her forcefully. Half an hour later, Ethan returned to the room. Nina was sitting quietly against the headboard, diligently writing something in a notebook. "Nina, what are you writing?" Ethan wasn't sure if it was his imagination, but he thought he saw words like visa application. "Nothing." Nina closed the notebook and, after a long pause, looked up at him. Ethan smiled and asked, "Our wedding is the day after tomorrow. Are you nervous?" Nina just shook her head. She suddenly remembered something. "Let's have dinner together tomorrow. One last dinner together to put a final, definitive end to this relationship." Ethan didn't notice the depth in her eyes at that moment. He agreed without a second thought. Of course, Chapter 9, on the eve of the wedding, Ethan arrived on time for their date, even bringing a bottle of expensive red wine to enhance the dinner. But as soon as they sat down, Ethan's phone began to buzz with consecutive messages. Then it started to ring. Ethan glanced at the caller ID and ruthlessly declined the call. But 2 seconds later, it rang again. Nina watched him calmly. "You should take the call." Ethan picked up his phone and stood up. A moment later, he rushed back to the table, grabbing his jacket and car keys. "Nina, something urgent came up at the office that I need to handle. You go ahead and eat. Don't wait for me." Listening to his voice fade away, Nina let out a self-deprecating smile. She ate the cold steak, bite by bite, and took a couple of sips of the red wine. Then she opened her social media. As expected, Valerie had posted another photo. In the picture, Ethan was standing on a rooftop, smiling with tears in his eyes as he watched fireworks in the sky. Valerie's caption read, "Prepared a spectacular fireworks display for the one I love most." Thankfully, he didn't refuse. Nina turned off her phone and stood up. She looked around the house, a place that held 3 years of memories with Ethan, and silently took out a large box and began to pack. It took her a full 3 hours. She sorted all the items that held their 3 years of memories into 3 large boxes. Then, without a second thought, she burned them all. Afterward, Nina spent the night compiling all the chat logs and social media posts Valerie had sent her onto a USB drive. By the time she finished, the sky was beginning to lighten. Nina gathered her things and headed alone to the wedding venue. The venue was decorated like a sea of flowers, filled with an air of joy. Ethan had even invited numerous media outlets to record this happy day for him. Dressed in an exquisite white wedding gown, Nina walked slowly towards Ethan. Seeing his teary-eyed, expectant face, her heart was as calm as still water. Nina took the microphone and handed the USB drive to the MC beside her. "Ethan, before the wedding begins, I have a gift for you." Ethan smiled. He was also curious about what the gift might be. As he watched the MC insert the USB drive into the computer to project it, a sudden, inexplicable nervousness washed over him. The large screen began to play. The next second, Ethan froze completely, because what was on the screen wasn't a collection of sweet memories of him and Nina. It was his chat logs and intimate photos with Valerie. A clap of thunder seemed to explode in Ethan's mind. His first instinct was to look at Nina, to explain. But the media reporters, like a pack of wolves, swarmed him, snapping photos and crowding around for interviews. Ethan frantically searched for Nina's figure until his gaze locked onto a single spot. Across the sea of people, Nina quietly watched the surrounded Ethan. She opened her mouth. Her words reached Ethan's ears, each one crystal clear. "Ethan Lockwood, it's over." Chapter 10. Hearing those words, Ethan felt the blood in his veins freeze. Everything around him, the cello music at the wedding, the clamor of the reporters' questions, the gasps of the guests, all faded into silence in his mind. All he could hear was Nina's voice saying, "It's over." No, this was the woman he had loved for 3 years. How could he allow this? But the more Ethan struggled to stop Nina, the more desperately the reporters blocked his path, preventing him from leaving. And so, he could only watch helplessly as Nina took off the engagement ring he had personally placed on her finger. Then, without hesitation, she tossed it into a nearby fountain. She didn't spare him another glance, simply turned and walked away. "No," Ethan roared. He didn't know where the strength came from, but he violently shoved 2 reporters aside. Then he fought his way through the crowd to chase after her. But in his frantic haste, he missed a step on the stairs and fell hard to the ground. By then, Nina had completely disappeared from sight. He dug his nails into the dirt, trying to use the pain to jolt himself awake. This had to be a dream. Otherwise, how could Nina be so cruel as to jilt him? How could she just leave him like this? Ethan clutched his heart in agony, choking back sobs. "Nina, I fell. It hurts so much. Please come back and help me up, okay?" Just then, through the gaps between his fingers, he thought he saw a white wedding dress stop in front of him. Then, a fair hand was extended towards him. Ethan thought Nina had come back and instantly looked up with joy. "Nina, I knew you couldn't bear to leave me." The next second, upon seeing that it was Valerie, the smile on Ethan's face vanished. His voice turned instantly cold. "What are you doing here?" Valerie was dressed in a pristine white wedding gown, holding a large bouquet of roses. She looked at Ethan with deep affection and said, "Ethan, do you remember? A month ago, I promised you I would personally snatch you back from Nina Sterling. I'm here to keep my promise." After speaking, she gently helped Ethan up from the ground and tried to kiss him. But unexpectedly, Ethan turned and viciously grabbed Valerie by the neck. The force was so great that Valerie felt a faint sense of suffocation. "Ethan, what are you doing? I can't breathe," cough, cough. But his grip didn't loosen in the slightest. His dark eyes were fixed on her. He gritted his teeth and asked, word by word, "Tell me, did you send those photos and chat logs to Nina?" This side of Ethan terrified Valerie for the first time. She shook her head desperately, tears welling up in her eyes. But Ethan showed no pity. "You're lying. If you hadn't let her find this evidence, she would never have run away, she would never have left me." Ethan crushed the roses Valerie had dropped on the ground under his foot. "Did you think I would marry you just because you crashed the wedding? The only person I will ever marry in this lifetime is Nina Sterling." Camera flashes went off all around them. The reporters, sensing a huge story, frantically captured the chaotic scene. Valerie's collar was being twisted, and she could barely breathe. Her face turned red as she weakly beat against Ethan's arm. Fearing for her life, a security guard rushed over and separated Ethan and Valerie. Ethan seemed to have been drained of all his strength at once. He collapsed again, but managed to hold on to his last shred of consciousness to give an order. "Quick, send people to find her at any cost. You must find Nina and bring her back." After saying this, he completely lost consciousness. Chapter 11. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he was met with the stark white ceiling of a hospital room, an IV drip in his hand. He felt dizzy and unwell, especially the persistent, dull ache in his chest. After a moment, his thoughts returned, and he finally understood the source of that ache. These real emotions were a stark reminder that none of it had been a dream. Nina had jilted him at the very moment he had been eagerly anticipating marrying her. She didn't want him anymore, and he had no one to blame but himself. He couldn't find a single reason to fault her. Just then, the door to the hospital room opened. Valerie walked in, carrying a thermos. Seeing Ethan with his eyes open, the thermos slipped from her hand. She lunged forward to hug him, muttering, "Ethan, you're finally awake. Do you know how worried I've been while you were unconscious?" Ethan frowned slightly and with a flicker of strength pushed Valerie off him. His voice was cold and detached. "What are you still doing here?" Valerie took his hand and pressed it to her cheek. "Ethan, what's wrong with you?" "Look at me, it's me. Valerie, how can you be so cold to me?" He stared at her with sharp eyes, devoid of any warmth, only endless indifference. After a moment, he shook his head gently. "No, I don't want you. I need to find Nina." He suddenly had a purpose, a renewed sense of hope. He threw off the blanket and was about to run out. Seeing him like this, Valerie panicked. She quickly wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, her voice trembling. "Ethan, didn't you say you wanted me to crash the wedding? I came on the wedding day, and I even brought you your favorite roses. I did all this for you. Why aren't you happy? Why have you suddenly stopped caring about me?" Ethan's voice was ice. "I don't have time for this now." Let go, but Valerie only tightened her arms, burying her head in the crook of his neck. "You were fine the day before the wedding. Please, go back to how you were before, okay?" Ethan gritted his teeth and said, word by word, "I'm telling you one last time. Let go." Valerie ignored his cold threat, continuing on her own. "While you were unconscious, Snowball got sick too. He misses you. Come home with me, let's go see him together." Suddenly, Ethan violently swept the vases off the nearby table. With a loud crash, glass shards scattered across the floor, some even cutting his feet. But he was oblivious to the pain. Valerie, however, was terrified by the scene and instantly let go of him. He turned to glare at her, the corners of his eyes bloodshot. "You dare mention the cat? That cat almost killed Nina. Why was it in my house in the first place? Did you think I didn't know about your little schemes? And another thing, crashing the wedding was just something I said on a whim. I never intended to marry you. Valerie, you remember this. You will never be worth even a single strand of Nina's hair in my eyes. Not then and not now." With that, Ethan walked out of the hospital, treading on the broken glass and leaving a trail of blood behind him. Behind him, Valerie's fists clenched tightly. Her eyes were dark, her face a mask of jealousy and resentment. Chapter 12, Rushing home, Ethan found the villa felt unnervingly empty. Although nothing seemed to have changed, he felt that everything was different. Finally, he understood the source of this strange feeling. All their photos together, the gifts they had exchanged, the crafts they had made, everything was gone. Panic seized him. He quickly called for the maid. "Where are Nina's and my things? Who gave you permission to put them away?" "Put them back out now," the housekeeper answered timidly. "Mr. Lockwood, Miss Sterling packed everything up herself. She took it all to the backyard and burned it, and she wouldn't let us stop her." "What? That's impossible." Ethan rushed upstairs to their room and threw open the closet to find it empty. He searched through drawers and cabinets, finding nothing but a few miscellaneous items he had added himself. But this place used to be filled with the books Nina loved to read, the models she collected. She had always been curious about new things, always buying interesting items to decorate their home. Yet this same person, who thrived on novelty, had stood by his side, devoted for 3 whole years. But now there was nothing left. Ethan felt the world spin around him. But he couldn't collapse. Nina hadn't forgiven him yet. He quickly tended to the cuts on his foot and then drove to the Sterling family home. Nina's family was just as, if not more, influential than his. But to help him through his company's most difficult time, Nina had given up her inheritance rights to stand with him and rebuild. For this, her parents had been furious with her, and their relationship had only begun to mend a year ago. Ethan believed that, after running away from the wedding, Nina must have returned to her family's home. Standing outside the gates of the Sterling mansion, he politely asked the security guards to let him in. But all he received were scornful looks. The events of the wedding had long since become the talk of Seaport City. Nina's parents, considering that Ethan had been unconscious for several days, hadn't actively sought him out to cause trouble. But that didn't mean they forgave what he had done. And the Sterling family staff, naturally feeling for their young miss, had no goodwill for Ethan, the culprit. But Ethan's desire to see Nina was too urgent. He was terrified that every second of delay would only strengthen her resolve to leave him. So, he knelt on the pavement outside the Sterling mansion's gates, begging Nina's parents to give him a chance to see her. The usually decisive and authoritative CEO, kneeling there without a care for his image, even startled the security guards. After some thought, a guard went to report the situation to Eleanor Sterling. But Eleanor, a woman who had seen it all, merely said with a light, dismissive tone, "As long as he doesn't die at the Sterling family's doorstep, he can kneel all he wants." For the next day and night, Ethan knelt outside the Sterling gates like a statue, unmoving. By the end, his face was pale, his lips were chapped, and his eyes were bloodshot. He was swaying, on the verge of collapsing. His assistant, standing by, couldn't believe his boss's stubbornness, a stubbornness that was starting to scare him. Concerned for Ethan's well-being, the assistant decided to forcibly take him back to rest. This time, Ethan didn't even have the strength to resist. He collapsed into the back seat of the car, his eyes staring blankly out the window, muttering ceaselessly, "Nina, I know I was wrong. What will it take for you to see me?" Chapter 13, the moment Nina stepped off the plane, she breathed in the fresh air and felt an immense sense of relief wash over her body and soul. She had actually done it. After a month of planning, she had successfully let go of that relationship, jilted her fiancé, and arrived in a foreign country. Her itinerary for the coming days was simple. First, she would wander around aimlessly, experiencing the local culture. Then, she would attend a few research conferences to make up for past regrets. Everything was going smoothly and perfectly. However, just as she walked out of the airport, she faintly heard someone calling her name. Following the sound, she saw a large sign with her name written on it in the crowd of people waiting for arrivals. Nina Sterling, Nina Sterling." Nathan Aston squeezed through the crowd, holding the sign, and jogged over to her. Meeting her slightly puzzled gaze, he wasn't offended. Instead, he smiled and joked, "What, it's only been 3 years and you've already forgot me, Nina?" Seeing the faint dimples at the corners of his lips and hearing that unique way of addressing her, Nina immediately recognized the man before her. Her old good friend, Nathan Aston. Their parents were neighbors, not only frequent business partners, but also close friends personally. It was said that Alina Sterling and Mrs. Aston had arranged a childhood engagement for them shortly after they were born. But later, Nina got together with Ethan, and the engagement was quietly forgot. Not long after, Nathan went abroad, and she lost contact with him. Now, after 3 years, he was much thinner and taller. If it weren't for his signature dimples, she would have barely recognized him. "Nathan, what are you doing here?" What she really wanted to ask was, why was he here to pick her up? Nathan's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. He solemnly patted her shoulder. "I know all about what happened back home. Your parents were worried you'd be alone out here and might get depressed. It just so happens I'm here, so they specifically asked me to look after you." Depressed? Nina found it a little amusing. She had indeed messaged her parents before boarding the plane to let them know her whereabouts and prevent them from worrying. But to think she'd be depressed was a bit of an exaggeration. She hadn't expected such a coincidence that Nathan would also be in this country. And she had to admit, seeing her friend of 3 years again made her very happy. Even the faint cloud of gloom that had been hanging over her heart seemed to dissipate. She chuckled lightly. "You guys really worry too much. My resilience isn't that fragile. Since I chose to run away from the wedding, stop, hold it right there." Nathan placed a finger on her lips and shook his head. "Let's not talk about all that unpleasant stuff. I understand and support every choice you make." With that, he enthusiastically grabbed her luggage. "It's getting late. Come on, I'll take you to get settled in." Watching his confident back as he strode towards the exit, Nina felt a warmth spread through her. She quickened her pace to catch up. Chapter 14, however, Nina never expected that the place Nathan meant by getting settled in was his own home. She had assumed he would drop her off at a hotel, and they would meet up the next day for a meal to catch up. At least, that's what she had been planning in her head on the way here. Now, standing in his living room, Nina felt a little awkward. Nathan looked at her and raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong? You think my humble abode is too small for you?" Nina waved her hands frantically. No, I just think, isn't it a bit inappropriate for an unmarried man and woman to be alone in a house together?" Nathan couldn't help but burst out laughing. He casually draped an arm over Nina's shoulder and leaned in to look at her. "Did I hear you right? We've known each other since before we could walk. Besides, it's not like there aren't any spare rooms here. Why are you being so formal with me? Or could it be?" His tone shifted, becoming teasing. "Could it be that you've been secretly in love with me all this time and you're afraid you'll be tempted if you stay here?" Hearing this, Nina laughed too. "Haha, not at all. You're really funny." She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but after she said that, she thought she saw a flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Then, Nathan's smile returned, and he pulled her down to sit. "In that case, just make yourself at home. Let me play the part of a gracious host. I promise to arrange a fantastic trip for you, don't you worry. Since he had put it that way, refusing would seem overly hesitant. So, Nina smiled helplessly and had no choice but to agree to stay. Over the next few days, Nathan took her to visit famous local landmarks, tour a museum rich with history, and in the evenings, they went to a unique bar to listen to the house singer perform. Not only that, but he also managed to get her a pass to a research conference. His hands-on, meticulous attention to detail moved Nina, and she wanted to do something for him in return. As it happened, one day Nina stumbled upon a painting in his study. It was of a snow-covered mountain. She almost immediately remembered when they were very young. Nathan had been watching a cartoon with a snow mountain and had excitedly told her how beautiful it was. He had said he wanted to make a wish at the very top of a snow mountain, that it would surely be more effective than a shooting star. She never thought that after all these years, his preference hadn't changed. At breakfast, while Nathan was discussing their upcoming plans with Nina, her phone suddenly received a message. It was from her mother, Eleanor, with a picture and a single sentence. He's been kneeling for almost a day and a night. He says he won't leave until he sees you. Do you want to see him? The picture was of Ethan, a thin figure, stubbornly kneeling outside the gates of the Sterling mansion. But looking at his miserable state, Nina felt no ripple in her heart. He was just unable to accept her departure for now. With Valerie to keep him company, how long could he persist in trying to win her back? After a brief glance at the photo, she replied simply, "Ignore him. And don't tell me about him anymore. What's wrong? Is there something at home that requires you to go back?" Nathan had seen that the message was from Eleanor, but hadn't seen the content. She shook her head and put her phone away. Then she brought the conversation back to their itinerary. "Didn't you just say we've seen everything around here? Then let's switch cities for our next adventure. Let's go to the snow mountain." Nathan's eyes instantly lit up. "Really? You want to go to the snow mountain too?" Seeing his enthusiastic expression, Nina suddenly felt her idea was a brilliant one. She replied with a light smile, "Yes, of course, I do." Chapter 15, there was a large snow-capped mountain in a nearby city. The two of them hit it off immediately, packed their bags simply, and set off. Throughout the journey, Nathan was visibly excited. Nina asked with a smile, "I remember when we were little, you said you had to climb a snow mountain one day. But logically, this mountain isn't far from you. Why haven't you gone yet?" Nathan answered quickly, without much thought, "You don't understand. The most precious wishes should be fulfilled with the person you love most. I've been waiting to have a fiancé to go with me to the very top of the snow mountain to make a wish." After he said that, he noticed the person beside him had been silent for a long time. He then realized that he might have accidentally said the wrong thing. Nina awkwardly ran a hand through her hair. She had originally planned a surprise for him at the summit, but it seemed she had inadvertently messed things up. She couldn't steal the credit from his future wife, could she? Thinking this, she said hesitantly, "Sorry, I didn't know you had these plans. Maybe we should go somewhere else, like the beach or something." "No, no, no." Nathan immediately explained, "I was just saying that, just kidding. Who knows if I'll even find a fiancé in the future. Right now, I just want you to go with me." After speaking, he gave Nina a bright smile. Nina paused for a moment, then smiled back, "Okay, sure." It seemed she had been overthinking it. After getting out of the car, Nina made an excuse to go to the restroom, asking Nathan to wait for her. A moment later, Nina came jogging back. There were tiny beads of sweat on her forehead, and she seemed to be holding something in her arms. Before Nathan could get a good look, she quickly picked up the luggage on the ground and called back to him, let's go." At the foot of the mountain, they happened to run into a team of adventurers. So everyone hit it off and supported each other on the way up. The process was surprisingly smooth. At the summit, Nathan spread his arms wide, taking in the beautiful scenery he had imagined countless times. "Nina, look, it's exactly like the cartoon we used to watch." He pointed to a distant peak and called back to Nina excitedly. However, the next second he froze. Nina pulled a delicate little cake from her bulging pocket and carefully took a candle from her backpack to place on top. Against the snowy backdrop, her eyes were bright and sparkling. "Nathan, happy birthday." The cake, having been squeezed in her pocket, was a bit misshapen. But to Nathan, it felt like the most precious gift he had ever received. He murmured, "I thought you had forgotten my birthday." After all, since the day he learned she had a boyfriend, he had been abroad for 3 years, during which they had barely been in contact. Nina chuckled lightly. Back home, I celebrated your birthday with you every year. How could I forget? From the moment she saw the snow mountain painting in Nathan's study and remembered his upcoming birthday, she had planned all of this. It wasn't just to celebrate his birthday, but also to thank him for his meticulous care over the past few days. She took out a lighter, lit the candle, and held the cake out to him. Make a wish. Nathan clasped his hands together and closed his eyes piously. The corners of his lips curved up slightly, his gentle face both refined and exquisite, making Nina's mind wander for a moment. She shook her head, thinking she was probably just not used to seeing him after so long, hence the momentary lapse. After making his wish, they admired the scenery for a while longer and took many photos. As dusk fell, they reluctantly prepared to descend the mountain. However, as they reached the halfway point, they suddenly heard the sound of cracking ice and snow all around them. Oh no, it's an avalanche. Nathan quickly grabbed Nina and started running down the mountain. But in the chaos, Nina tripped and felt a sharp pain in her leg. Nathan immediately pulled her up, using all his strength to help her run. The roaring around them grew louder. Just as Nina felt a sense of dread, someone gave her a hard push. She had just stumbled a few more steps forward when a torrent of white snow cascaded down. It seemed to want to bury everything in its path. After an unknown amount of time, Nina managed to crawl out of the thick snow. All she could see was an all-consuming whiteness, and Nathan was nowhere to be seen. Realizing that it was he who had used his last bit of strength to push her, she panicked. Nathan, where are you? Nina's mind went blank, her hands numbly and frantically digging through the vast expanse of snow. Chapter 16. Ethan Lockwood had been very busy lately. After failing to contact Nina through every possible means, he turned to another method. He began to lock himself in his study or office day and night, constantly editing something on his computer. Employees brought stacks of documents to his desk, one after another. The documents were about the latest series of couples' jewelry from a subsidiary jewelry company under Lockwood Industries. Ethan named this series YN, derived from the initials of Nina Sterling's name. Furthermore, he was going to personally shoot the promotional ad for this jewelry with the theme of love and regret. He wanted to use this method to show Nina his sincerity. As Ethan was brainstorming the details of the ad, the office door was suddenly pushed open. He didn't need to think to know that the only person who would dare to barge into his office without knocking was Valerie Vance. In the past, he had only given Valerie this unique privilege. But now, his entire focus was on this ad meant to win Nina back. He didn't even look up, just said coldly, "Get out. From now on, you are not allowed to enter my office without permission." Valerie, her face haggard, stared at the man before her with lifeless eyes. After a few days of adjustment, she had more or less gotten used to Ethan's attitude towards her, shifting from extreme care to icy coldness. But getting used to it didn't mean she was willing to accept it. Valerie clenched her fists, suddenly rushed over, and hugged Ethan, who was sitting in his office chair. She whispered in his ear, her voice trembling, "Ethan, can you please not be so cold to me? I really can't take it anymore. Nina jilted you at the altar, and she released all those photos of us to humiliate you. What's so special about a person like that you're still hung up on her?" Upon learning that Ethan had named the new jewelry line YN, Valerie immediately connected it to Nina. Coupled with the news that Ethan had been engrossed in designing the jewelry ad, it became clear to her that he was determined to win Nina back. So she couldn't sit still any longer. This time, no matter what, she had to win back this man's heart. She started whispering in Ethan's ear about their past. "Ethan, do you remember? When we first met, I was being harassed by some hooligans on the street, and you rushed to save me without a second thought. You were injured then, but you still held me tightly in your arms. From that moment, I knew that I would spend the rest of my life with you, even if it meant sacrificing my own. Later, to keep up with you, I went abroad to follow up on a project, but I never expected Nina to take advantage of the situation. But how could a petty person like her be worthy of you?" We're the ones who are halfway through her sentence, Valerie suddenly screamed in pain. Ethan had grabbed her wrist, which was wrapped around him, and twisted it back sharply. He forcefully threw her off him. His sharp eyes, filled with rage, were fixed on Valerie. Who gave you permission to speak ill of Nina? Do you think you're even worthy of being compared to her? He advanced on Valerie, step by step. Valerie collapsed to the floor, scrambling backward in fear. From your deliberate approach at the beginning to running off with the money and now joining the company, what have you ever done that wasn't for my money? I never did anything to wrong you, but what about you? Why did you have to drive Nina away from me? Ethan felt a tearing pain in his heart. He was such a fool. How could he have hurt Nina time and time again for someone like this, ultimately causing her to leave in disappointment? When he opened his eyes again, his expression had returned to the calm, emotionless state he had maintained for the past few days. He delivered his verdict to Valerie with icy finality. From this moment on, all your projects are suspended. I will not spend another cent on you. After Valerie was taken away, Ethan sat back down at his computer. He secretly resolved that this time, the whole world would see this ad, filled with his apology. When Nina saw everything he had done for her, she would surely forgive him. Chapter 17, Melbourne, Inside the Hospital. Nathan Aston felt as if he had been in a very long dream. Outside the dream, a voice had been constantly calling him, begging him to wake up. The voice was so mournful and urgent that he desperately wanted to know who it belonged to. So he opened his eyes and saw Nina Sterling. Nathan, you're awake. Seeing him finally conscious, Nina was overcome with excitement, but she immediately asked with concern, "How are you feeling? Does anything hurt?" Nathan shook his head. When he spoke, his voice was dry and hoarse. "I'm fine. What happened?" Looking around, he seemed to be in a hospital. Nina's brow furrowed with worry as she patiently explained, "Don't you remember? We went to the snow mountain together, but on the way down, we were caught in an avalanche." Then, in a few simple words, she told him how, after the avalanche, she had searched for him in the vast snow, finally found him after a difficult search, and was lucky enough to be found by the rescue team. Listening to her story, Nathan's consciousness gradually returned, and he remembered everything that had happened that day. The moment before the avalanche, he had used all his strength to push Nina away, and he himself had collapsed from exhaustion. At that moment, only one thought was in his mind: Nina had to be safe. Thankfully, he had succeeded. Looking at the unharmed woman before him, he smiled gently. "How long was I out?" "A full 2 days and 2 nights. Nina said in a deliberately exaggerated tone, "I've been watching you nonstop these 2 days, just waiting for you to wake up. I was thinking if you were still unconscious on the 3rd day, I'd have to call your parents." Although she spoke with exaggeration, seeing the dark circles under her eyes, Nathan knew she was probably telling the truth. 2 days and 2 nights, without leaving his side. A sense of satisfaction filled his heart, and he joked, "If my parents found out I went out with you and ended up in a coma, they'd probably insist you take responsibility for the rest of my life." Nina thought for a moment and said solemnly, "If that were the case, I would take care of your parents in your place and look after you for the rest of my life." Thinking about it that way, being in a coma doesn't sound so bad. She playfully tapped his head. "Don't talk nonsense." Although Nathan was awake, the doctor said he still needed to rest in the hospital for a while. Over the next few days, Nina took impeccable care of him. It made him feel that being hospitalized wasn't such a bad thing after all. 2 weeks later, Nathan was discharged from the hospital. The first thing he wanted to do was get some fresh air. The two of them were strolling and ended up under a large screen in a public square. It was playing a romantic concept short film for YN Jewelry. The story was about a couple who broke up due to a misunderstanding, but after the boys' efforts to win her back, they finally reconciled. At the end of the short film, a line of text faintly appeared. "YN, I'm sorry, but I love you." As she watched, Nina's brow furrowed. Many passers-by were moved by the short film, whispering among themselves. That last line doesn't feel like a slogan, more like something said to a specific person. Considering the corporation behind the jewelry, the name YN, and the content of the short film, Nina almost immediately realized it was Ethan's doing. And the text at the end was what he wanted to convey to her. Of course, Nathan soon realized this as well. He asked the person beside him with feigned casualness, "The ex-fiancé is quite the romantic, huh? What do you think?" Nina's emotions, however, were stable. She simply replied, "I don't have any thoughts on it, but I am preparing to go back home. I've achieved my goal of coming out here to clear my head. I can't keep running away forever." After all, I'm quite looking forward to the rest of my life. Nathan nodded in agreement. All right, then I'll go back with you. Nina looked at him, a bit surprised. I thought you didn't have plans to go back home anytime soon. But he just looked at the crowd in the distance, a faint smile on his lips. I'm planning to develop my career back home. Besides, I can't think of a reason to stay abroad anymore. Chapter 18, the ad, personally designed by Ethan, caused a huge sensation upon its release. Sales of the YN Jewelry series reached new highs, and the concept short film began to be shown globally. But Ethan felt no joy from any of this, because he wasn't sure if the person he cared about had seen everything he had done, or if, after seeing his efforts, she was still unwilling to forgive him. It had been a month. He hadn't seen Nina for a whole month, nor had he received any news from her. Ethan finally couldn't sit still any longer. He decided to go to the Sterling family home again to beg Alina to let him see Nina. Just then, there was a commotion outside his office. Since he had kicked Valerie out of his office last time, she had come to cause trouble a few more times, but always left empty-handed. Ethan went out to look, and sure enough, it was Valerie again. He said coldly, "What do you want?" This was the first time Ethan had looked her in the eye in a long time. Valerie immediately pushed aside the assistant who was blocking her and began to complain pitifully. "Ethan, you can't stop my research project. Those old-timers finally approved my proposal. Everything is ready, we just need your final approval. Can you really bear to see all my hard work go to waste like this?" If she hadn't mentioned the research project, it would have been better. The moment she did, Ethan immediately remembered the day Valerie was being bullied at the company. To help Valerie establish authority and make the senior staff obey her, he had given her Nina's research results. The disappointed look in Nina's eyes that day was something he would never forget. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, then spoke. "I was wrong to say I would stop your project last time." A glimmer of hope appeared on Valerie's face. "Because I should have just fired you directly, what? Ethan, how could you?" Ethan didn't spare her another glance. He ordered his assistant, "Take her to process her resignation. I don't want to see her in this company ever again." With that, he strode past Valerie and hurried out. When Ethan arrived at the Sterling family's gate, he happened to run into Alina, who was about to leave. He quickly went up to her and pleaded in a low voice, "Auntie, I'm begging you, please let me see Nina. I know I've done a lot of wrong things and hurt her, but I really want to see her. I'll explain everything." Alina gave him a cool, disdainful look. "Ha, explain? Were the chat logs fake? Was that not you in the photos?" Hearing her mention the evidence Nina had revealed at the wedding, Ethan was at a loss for words, his face turning pale. Alina gestured for the bodyguards to drag Ethan away and then got into her car to leave. But just as the car started, Ethan found a burst of strength from somewhere. He fought off the bodyguards and, without a second thought, spread his arms to block the car. The car screeched to a halt less than an inch from him. Alina angrily rolled down the window. "What do you think you're doing? Are you insane?" But Ethan showed no fear, stubbornly repeating, "Auntie, I just want to see her." Finally, Alina sighed in resignation. "She's not here." The afternoon after she ran away from the wedding, she left the country. Upon learning that Nina was not in the country, Ethan immediately rushed to the airport. But when it came to buying a ticket, he was at a loss. He had no idea which country Nina was in. The world was so big, how was he going to find her? Just then, he saw a familiar figure in the distance in the airport lobby. Ethan's eyes widened. It was Nina, but why was there another man with her? Chapter 19, seeing Nina laughing and talking with that man, looking so familiar and at ease, a surge of anger rose in Ethan's heart. Especially when, in the next second, he saw the man affectionately touch Nina's hair, he couldn't stop himself from rushing forward. "Nina, you have a feather in your hair." Just as Nathan was about to reach out and remove it for her, a sudden force shoved him violently aside. Looking up, he met Ethan's furious eyes. "Who are you? Who gave you permission to touch her?" After his angry outburst, Ethan turned to face Nina, his expression instantly shifting to a smile. "Nina, I'm here to take you home. Did you have a good trip?" He took the luggage from Nina's hand with one hand and tried to link arms with her with the other. But Nina was unmoved. She calmly removed Ethan's hand and stood in front of Nathan, questioning him without mercy. "Ethan, The question you just asked him is what we should be asking you. Who gave you permission to touch my friend? Where are your manners? Ethan's breath hitched. He had never heard Nina speak to him in such a reprimanding tone, especially not to protect another man. In front of him, Nina turned to Nathan with concern. Nathan, are you okay? You're not hurt, are you? Nathan shook his head, glanced at Ethan, and then said disdainfully, I'm fine. Just pretend I got bitten by a stray dog. Let's ignore him and go. But of course, Ethan wasn't going to let Nina leave with another man right in front of him. He blocked their path again, his eyes fixed on Nathan. Nina had called him Nathan. The name sounded familiar. After observing Nathan's handsome face more closely, Ethan finally remembered. You're Nathan Aston. Nathan crossed his arms, looking at him provocatively. Yes, what's it to you? During the year he was painstakingly pursuing Nina before they got together, Ethan had met Nathan a few times. And at that time, he had considered Nathan his #1 rival. Although Nathan and Nina were childhood friends, he had keenly sensed that the way Nathan looked at Nina was not just as a friend. But luckily for him, at that time, he was heartbroken and dejected, and out of pity, Nina had been trying her best to help him. This had given him the opportunity to get close to her. After he successfully confessed his feelings to Nina, Nathan had gone abroad and had not been a part of their lives for the past 3 years. But now, Ethan couldn't help but connect Nina's trip abroad with Nathan, who was also abroad. He gritted his teeth and asked him, Did you deliberately mislead Nina, making her go abroad to find you? Don't even think about taking her away from me, Nathan sneered, looking at the man before him as if he were a joke. Ethan, do I need to remind you who Valerie is, or what you and Valerie were doing before the wedding? You think I'm the one trying to take Nina from you, but have you ever thought about who didn't cherish her and pushed her away in the first place? Ethan was furious. Shut up, he raised his fist, ready to strike. But before the punch could land, Nathan firmly gripped his wrist. And at the same time as Nathan, Nina also moved to stop him. Chapter 20, Nina forcefully pushed his hand down. That's enough, Ethan looked at Nina, feeling wronged. Nina, don't listen to his nonsense. I never wanted to push you away. Please, let me explain. There's no need to explain, Ethan. I made it very clear to you on the wedding day. We're over. But Ethan stubbornly blocked her path, refusing to let her leave. He shook his head desperately. No, Nina, you can't refuse to listen to my explanation. You can't deny me even a chance to explain. Didn't you once say you would never abandon me, no matter what? Nina's brow furrowed slightly. She took a deep breath and looked at him calmly. A month before our wedding, I followed an address from an investigator to a villa, which was supposedly another home you shared with Valerie. Outside your window, I heard you with my own ears telling Valerie to come and crash the wedding, and you swore that if she dared to show up, you would immediately abandon me and marry her. Am I right? Recalling the events of that day, and how Ethan had repeatedly neglected her for Valerie afterward, it was a lie to say Nina's heart didn't ache. Even after so much time had passed, just mentioning it again brought a dull, almost desperate pain to her chest. But she thought that with enough time, she would eventually forget these wounds. Do I need to continue with what happened next? After deciding on the wedding crashing plan, how you two intimately embraced, how you passionately kissed? No, don't say any more. Ethan immediately cut her off. He never imagined she had known so early on and had endured it for so long. His heart was pounding violently. Never before had he felt so strongly that Nina truly didn't want him anymore. He explained in a panic, Nina, I can explain all of this. I did say I wanted Valerie to crash the wedding, but it was just something I said in anger. I never intended to marry any woman other than you at the wedding. The reason I told her to crash the wedding was because even after 4 years, I was still bitter about her betrayal, her abandoning me, and running off with the money. So I planned for her to crash the wedding, and then I would reject her at the altar. Nina, I did all of this out of resentment for that youthful relationship, but I swear, the person I have always loved is you, and only you. Nathan couldn't listen anymore. He stepped forward and interrupted him. Do you even believe what you're saying? Until just now, Nathan had never imagined the betrayal Nina had endured beneath her calm exterior. Furthermore, as far as he knew, Nina had had several serious, life-threatening accidents in the month leading up to the wedding. He would never believe that these incidents had nothing to do with Ethan and his mistress. He asked with deliberate sarcasm, Buying a house and arranging a job for your old flame, then having her crash the wedding only to be rejected. What a cruel method of revenge. If you hadn't called it revenge, I would have thought Valerie was some kind of benefactor to you, for you to go to such lengths to please her. Ethan wanted to retort, but he opened his mouth and was speechless. Nathan paused, then said coldly, "Ethan, the moment you decided to use your and Nina's wedding as a tool to get revenge on your old flame, you were no longer worthy of her." After these words, the only sound was the breathing of the three of them. Ethan turned to look at Nina and asked with a trembling voice, "Nina, do you think so too? Are you really completely disappointed in me?" Nina gave a self-deprecating smile. "Before I was completely disappointed in you, you were the one who had a change of heart first. Can you deny that you did, in fact, have the thought of letting Valerie crash the wedding?" "Ethan, you can love two people at the same time. That's your talent, but I have no intention of accepting such a divided, cheap love." Ethan stared at her blankly. In a moment, his eyes filled with tears. "No, I know I was wrong. Now my heart only has you." Just then, Nina's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and quickly answered. Something the person on the other end said made her face turn pale with horror. Chapter 21, Nina spoke into the phone with a heavy voice. "Okay, I'll be right there." Then she grabbed Nathan's arm and was about to leave. But Ethan still stubbornly blocked her path. "Nina, don't go with him." Before he could finish, Nina shoved him hard. Ethan, caught off balance, stumbled and fell to the ground. But Nina didn't even glance at him as she hurried away with Nathan. Ethan sat collapsed on the ground, his eyes stinging. He covered his face, but tears still streamed through his fingers. After leaving the airport, Nina hailed a cab, giving the address of a hospital. Nathan asked with concern, "What happened? Are your parents at the hospital?" Nina was still reeling from the shock. After a long moment, she said stiffly, "No, it's Grandma. Grandma has collapsed." Her mother had just told her on the phone that her grandmother had fainted in her bedroom. After being rushed to the hospital, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. She couldn't believe it. Her grandmother, who was always so health-conscious and lived so actively, how could she suddenly be struck down by illness? Upon arriving at the hospital, Nina was in a panic. Thankfully, Nathan was there to calmly help her find the right room. Grandma Sterling was lying in bed, looking very weak. But upon seeing Nina, she still summoned the strength to wave her over. "Ninny, come here." Nina went to her and took her hand, her eyes welling with tears. "Grandma, I'm here." "Ninny, don't cry. Grandma has lived a long life. It's about time I went to join your grandpa. But I have one last regret." Nina's eyes were red. "Grandma, tell me." Grandma Sterling patted her hand. "My only regret now is that I didn't get to see you settle down, to see you have someone to share your life with." Hearing this, Nina's guilt deepened. It was her fault for choosing the wrong person, for wasting 3 years on Ethan. And now, at her age, she was still making her grandmother worry about her future. As she was thinking this, someone gently patted her shoulder. Nathan took Nina's other hand and smiled at Grandma Sterling. "Grandma, please don't worry. Nina and I are together now. We'll be by each other's side for the rest of our lives." "Are really?" A look of joy spread across Grandma Sterling's face, and she became a little flustered with excitement. "Nathan, Grandma hasn't seen you in 3 years. I never thought the next time I saw you, you'd bring me such wonderful news." "So, have you gotten your marriage license yet? When's the wedding?" Nina looked at Nathan's hand holding hers, still trying to process what was happening. We came back this time to get our license. Don't worry, Grandma." After answering for her, Nathan gave her a little wink. Grandma Sterling nodded repeatedly, her eyes now a little misty. "My granddaughter, she's had a rough path in love. But thankfully, she's finally found the right one." After leaving the room, Nina was frowning and sighing. It wasn't just because of her grandmother's illness, but also because after hearing they were getting married, her grandmother had demanded to see their marriage certificate. She asked Nathan hesitantly, "Should I see if I can find a place that makes realistic-looking fake certificates?" Nathan replied without looking up, "What if she finds out? Let's just go get a real marriage certificate tomorrow." "But you..." Nathan chuckled lightly and said to her seriously, "What, are you not going to be a good friend? Grandma has known me since I was a child. Right now, to make sure she has no regrets, just getting a marriage certificate is nothing to me. Or, are you embarrassed to have me on your family's household register?" Of course, Nina wasn't embarrassed. At this point, she was incredibly grateful to Nathan, and since he had put it that way, she had no reason to refuse. She secretly resolved that after this was all over, she would find a way to make it up to Nathan. Chapter 22, Outside the Lockwood family's gates. After being fired by Ethan, Valerie discovered that he had also blocked her on all his contact methods. But if she couldn't see Ethan again, she would go crazy. She couldn't bear to see all her careful planning go to waste, so she decided to try her luck at the Lockwood family home. She was now shouting loudly outside the gates. "Uncle, Auntie, the news of Nina Sterling jilting Ethan at the wedding is everywhere. People are calling Ethan a two-timing scumbag. Can you really bear to see your son's name dragged through the mud like this? There's only one way now, and that's for me to marry Ethan. That's the only way to restore his reputation and help him move on from being jilted. Uncle, Auntie, you need to weigh the pros and cons." Arthur Lockwood came storming out of the villa with a golf club in his hand, pointing at Valerie and roaring, "Vile woman, shut your mouth." Years ago, Valerie had used Ethan to swindle money from the Lockwood family and fled overseas, nearly causing the family to collapse and disappear from Seaport City. Although 4 years had passed, Arthur still remembered these events vividly. And because of this, he was even more grateful to Nina, who had saved the Lockwood family at a critical moment. Not only that, Nina had been consistently polite and thoughtful to the Lockwood family for years, always taking care of everything personally. In Arthur's heart, he had long considered Nina his daughter-in-law, but he never expected his own son to be so foolish as to hurt Nina for the sake of this shameless swindler. Of course, Valerie was not without blame in all of this. Valerie, oblivious to the impending danger, continued stubbornly, "Our chat logs and photos are all over the internet now. Uncle, think about it. What other option do you have besides letting Ethan marry me?" Arthur tightened his grip on the golf club, his chest heaving with anger. "My other option is to beat you to death." With that, he raised the club and began to swing it wildly at Valerie. Just as Ethan arrived home, he was greeted by this chaotic scene. Valerie was already bruised and battered, screaming and running for her life, but Arthur showed no signs of stopping. His arrival was like a lifeline to her. Valerie scrambled to his feet, begging, "Ethan, your father has gone mad, you have to stop him." But Ethan felt no pity for her. In fact, he felt a sense of relief. He gave her a cold look and slowly spat out 2 words, "You deserve it." Then, he kicked her to the ground and walked into the villa without a second glance. Chapter 23, Today was the day Nina and Nathan had agreed to go to City Hall to get their marriage license. Even though she knew it was just a temporary measure, she was so nervous she barely slept a wink. She got ready early, chose a decent outfit, and drove to pick up Nathan. Nathan saw the 2 large dark circles under her eyes and chuckled for a long time. But when he looked up, Nina saw that he had 2 dark circles of his own. Because of this coincidence, the atmosphere on the way to get their license was much more relaxed. Everything went smoothly. As she watched the official stamp the red seal on the certificate, Nina felt a strange sensation. She and Nathan were now connected, even if it was only for a short time. After leaving City Hall, Nina took the initiative to invite him. "I heard your parents are on a trip, and there's no one at your house right now. Why don't you move in with me?" As if afraid he would refuse, she quickly added, "Don't worry, my house has plenty of spare rooms for you to choose from, just like when we were abroad." Nina was currently living in a villa her parents had bought for her years ago. It was fully furnished and had everything they needed. It would be no problem for the 2 of them to live comfortably without lowering their standard of living. "Oh, okay." Nathan agreed without much thought. He had his own considerations. Not only could he be closer to her, but there was also the added benefit of not easily letting the secret slip in front of her grandmother. They had a simple meal outside and then took the marriage certificate to the hospital to show her grandmother. Grandma Sterling was overjoyed to see that they were really married. She couldn't stop smiling as she examined the certificate over and over. This made Nina secretly breathe a sigh of relief. Thank goodness she hadn't chosen to fake it. Given her grandmother's meticulous inspection, a fake one might have actually been discovered. Over the next few days, Nina helped Nathan move while gradually taking over the reins of Sterling Corporation. One day, she received a strange cooperation proposal from a strange business partner. The other party, clearly a businessman, was repeatedly lowering his terms, even willing to take a loss just to partner with Sterling Corporation. Considering the interests of the company, Nina agreed to meet with this partner. Upon hearing the news, the other party appeared in her office less than 2 hours later. Nina looked up, and the person who had come was Ethan Lockwood. Ethan waved the project proposal in his hand and walked to her desk with a smile. "Nina, I'm here to discuss a partnership with you." Nina let out a small sigh. She said nothing, simply closed the proposal in front of her and tossed it into the trash can. The smile on Ethan's face instantly froze. "Nina, you? Please leave. I will inform my assistant not to accept any more partnership invitations from you." Nina began to type seriously on her computer. "Why? I just want to maintain a cooperative relationship with you. Is that not even possible?" He seemed to be on the verge of a breakdown. "It's been over a month. I've been apologizing, I've been explaining, but why can't you just give me another chance? We were together for 3 whole years. Do you really have no feelings for me at all?" He refused to believe that Nina's heart could be so cold. Nina remained silent. It wasn't that she didn't know how to answer, but she didn't want to waste any more breath on such a shallow question. If she truly had no feelings for him, how could she have been so tormented that she couldn't sleep at night after learning the truth? How could she have repeatedly tried to find evidence that he still loved her? But now none of it mattered anymore. Just then, the office door opened again. Nathan appeared with a lunch box. Before he even walked in, he said familiarly, "Ninny, I'm here to visit. Let's see how your morning's work has turned out." Ethan's nails dug fiercely into his palm. What right did he have to speak to Nina in such an intimate tone? Chapter 24, Nathan was taken aback when he saw Ethan. He handed the lunch box to Nina before asking coldly, "What are you doing here?" Ethan's tone was equally hostile. "I'm here to see my fiancé. It's none of your business." Nathan found this amusing. "If you insist on putting it that way, then it actually is my business." With that, he slowly pulled a marriage certificate from his bag and held it in front of Ethan. "Take a look. This fiancé you're talking about is now my legal wife." Ethan rolled his eyes, thinking Nathan was trying to trick him with some prop. He snatched the certificate irritably, about to mock Nathan, when he saw the photo of the two of them and the bright, official stamp. "This? How could this be?" His eyes widened in an instant, his breathing becoming ragged. He looked at it several times in disbelief, confirming that the marriage certificate was real. Ethan's hands began to tremble. How could this have happened? Ever since he got together with Nina, he had worked hard every single day, just so he could grow enough to be worthy of proposing to her. He had finally reached his current position, finally succeeded in his proposal, but what was this marriage certificate? He had never imagined that the man on a marriage certificate with Nina would be anyone other than himself. How was this possible? "Hey, if you're done looking, give it back." Nathan impatiently reached for the certificate. But Ethan was still in a state of shock, refusing to believe what was in front of him. He bit his lip hard and, in a sudden fit of rage, tried to tear the glaring certificate in his hands. Just then, Nina grabbed his wrist, preventing him from using force. Then she quickly snatched the certificate from his hand. "What do you think you're doing?" Her gaze towards him was now filled with nothing but disgust. Ethan, however, desperately grabbed the corner of her clothes, as if clinging to his last lifeline. "Nina, this isn't real, right?" He pointed at Nathan and asked her, "How could you leave me and marry another man in such a short time? What did he promise you? Tell me, whatever he can give you, I can give you too." "Nina, my heart, my fortune, everything I have, I'll give it all to you, as long as you're willing to come back to me. How could you get married to someone else?" "No, this is impossible. This isn't real." By the end, his voice was almost a roar. Nina just watched him quietly. After his hysterical outburst, she said 4 cold words. "Stop this madness." She raised her hand and summoned security, ordering them to throw him out without a second thought. Ethan thrashed wildly against the guards, shouting, "Impossible," over and over. Nina watched coldly, showing not a shred of pity for him from beginning to end. After Ethan was finally dragged away, she sat back down at her desk and opened the lunchbox Nathan had brought with great interest. "Let's see what goodies you brought today." Nathan smiled as he watched her show delight and appreciation for the food he brought. After studying her for a moment, he suddenly said, "You've lost weight." These days, Nina had been running between the hospital and the company, barely spending any time at home. She was also recently developing a new health supplement, hoping to help more elderly people like her grandmother. With all this, she had become quite haggard. Nathan, worried she would be too busy to eat, had taken to bringing her lunch every day to make sure she did. Chapter 25, after watching Nina finish the last bite of food in the lunchbox, he said, "Grandma called me yesterday. She said she's craving the pastries from the west side of town. How about we buy some for her after you get off work?" "Sure," Nina nodded, teasing him. "I visit Grandma every day, but when she wants something to eat, you're the first person she thinks of. I'm hurt." "Of course. I'm Grandma's most precious grandson-in-law now. You can't be jealous." Nathan replied without a hint of modesty, but after saying it, he was the one who blushed first. At the hospital, Grandma Sterling seemed much more energetic than she had been recently. Perhaps the fact that Nina was finally married had given her immense comfort. Looking at the newlywed couple, she couldn't stop smiling. Nathan started chatting with her about everyday things. He would occasionally crack a joke, making the old woman laugh heartily. Nina peeled fruit on the side, an unconscious smile playing on her lips. She had to admit, the warm scenes she had imagined countless times, Nathan had effortlessly brought to life. Nathan's presence often made her feel incredibly lucky. Just then, her phone rang. Nina put down the fruit and quietly stepped into the hallway to answer. "What's wrong?" "CEO Sterling, something's wrong. You need to come to the company right away." Nina never expected that the health supplement she had developed, which was about to be launched, would be embroiled in a plagiarism scandal. Someone had uploaded the data for a key ingredient to a social media platform, along with the complete development process of the project, accusing Nina of plagiarizing their research results. The research for this ingredient had been conducted when Nina was still with Ethan. For convenience at the time, all the data had been stored at Lockwood Industries. The only person who could access this evidence and the complete project now. Could it be Ethan? But Ethan had been begging her for reconciliation just that morning. How could he have changed his tune so quickly? Another name suddenly popped into Nina's mind. Valerie Vance. Back then, to help Valerie gain a foothold at Lockwood Industries, Ethan had given her Nina's research project. So, besides Ethan, Valerie was the only other person who had access to the complete project. A chill ran down Nina's spine. From the provocative chat logs at the beginning, to the attempted murder by proxy, the cat fur incident, and now this plagiarism scandal. She had never wanted to go after Valerie, but Valerie was pushing her to the brink, step by step. And now she had indeed succeeded. Over the next few days, the news of the plagiarism scandal continued to spread. Sterling Corporation's stock plummeted, partners canceled their contracts one after another, and the company was in deep trouble. Being in the same business world, Ethan naturally learned of all this. He quickly identified Valerie as the suspect. He acted fast. When Ethan arrived at Valerie's place, all he saw were empty liquor bottles. At first, Valerie didn't think much of seeing him, assuming she was dreaming. It wasn't until Ethan poured half a bottle of beer over her head that the cold shock brought her back to reality. Valerie immediately threw herself at Ethan, clinging to him. "Ethan, you finally came to see me. Have you realized that I'm the one who loves you most? Are you willing to come back to me?" The strong smell of alcohol on her made Ethan frown. He roughly pushed her away and said coldly, "Go and clarify immediately that you deliberately framed Nina." Valerie looked at him deeply, a hint of clarity returning to her eyes. After a long pause, she shook her head gently. "I won't." "What did you say?" Valerie suddenly sneered. "You've ignored me for so many days, but the moment something happens to Nina, you come running." "Ethan, do you really love her that much? But you're the one who hurt her the most. Don't you think you're a hypocrite?" Ethan grabbed her by the collar. "Cut the nonsense. I'm telling you one last time, go and clarify." "Ha, if you really want me to clarify, it's not impossible. But I have one condition." Ethan's face was impassive. "Name it." "The condition is," Valerie said, word by word, "you marry me immediately." The moment those words left her mouth, Ethan shoved her hard to the ground. He looked down at her from above. "In your dreams, do you think you can threaten me? Besides you clarifying voluntarily, I have 10,000 other ways to get her out of this crisis." With that, Ethan left the house without another glance, showing no lingering attachment. Chapter 26, Nina hung up the phone, her heart heavy. This was the 8th partner to cancel their contract. If this continued, Sterling Corporation would face immeasurable losses. She couldn't just sit here and worry. She quickly grabbed her car keys and headed to the partner's company. Downstairs, she had to plead with the receptionist for a while before being allowed to go up. As she reached the door, she faintly heard a familiar voice. Looking inside, she saw Nathan, humbling himself, holding a thick stack of documents and explaining something to the partner. Director Davis, according to professional statistics, Sterling Corporation has immense growth potential in Seaport City. I hope you can give us another chance. And please be assured, Sterling Corporation will not fall easily. The Aston and Sterling families are now united by marriage. I will do everything in my power to help them through this crisis. Director Davis said nothing, but he maintained a polite smile. Seeing this, Nina felt as if she had been punched in the face. Her nose began to sting. What had she done to deserve this? To have the esteemed heir of the Aston family beg on her behalf? Thinking this, Nina walked straight in and grabbed Nathan's arm. Nathan, stop. I'll take you home first. Nathan was only surprised for a moment by her sudden appearance, then immediately stated his position. No, I'm not done talking to Director Davis yet. Listen to me, Nathan. This is something I should be doing, not you making all these sacrifices. Nina felt her voice choke up. Director Davis cleared his throat, interrupting them. He first met Nina's eyes, then sighed helplessly. Director Aston, CEO Sterling, it's not that I don't want to work with Sterling Corporation, but you know the current situation. I really can't take this risk. CEO Sterling, I trust your character, but plagiarism. I really can't condone it. Before Nina could speak, Nathan couldn't help but say, I can vouch for Nina. She has absolutely never plagiarized anything. Director Davis shook his head. Your guarantee to me is useless. It doesn't matter if I believe in your innocence. The key is to make the public believe it. Otherwise, they won't feel safe consuming your products. Sai, I've had a very good partnership with Sterling Corporation over the years. How about this? As long as you can clear up the plagiarism issue quickly, we'll sign a new contract. As a fellow businessperson, Nina knew this was the biggest concession Director Davis could make. She immediately made a solemn promise to him, vowing to turn public opinion around within a week. Back at the company, Nina threw herself into her work in the office. She had to search through mountains of data for key process records that could be used as evidence. And Nathan stayed by her side, day and night. Finally, on the last day of the agreed-upon week, Nina had compiled all the evidence she could find. She immediately uploaded it all to the internet. Almost at the same moment she released the evidence, Ethan, on behalf of Lockwood Industries, also issued a statement. In the statement, he openly admitted to giving Nina's work to Valerie without permission and deceiving everyone for so long. With this solid evidence and the judgment of professionals, Nina finally reclaimed her research results. But Ethan wasn't so lucky. He and Lockwood Industries, for exposing their own ugly actions, had to suffer public condemnation alongside Valerie, the one who had stolen another's work. But Ethan had no regrets. He had truly been prepared to lose Lockwood Industries to clear Nina's name. This was what he owed her. He had to pay it back. The condemnation he was receiving now was nothing compared to the torment Nina had endured because of him. Chapter 27. Because the incident had such a huge impact online, Valerie's fabrication of facts was about to be investigated. With nowhere else to turn, she went to find Ethan again. She had it all figured out. Ethan couldn't be completely devoid of feelings for her. If she threatened him with her life, he would definitely not stand by and do nothing. But this time, Ethan didn't even give her a chance to see him. Valerie completely broke down. She used to hold the top spot in Ethan's heart. How did it come to this? Ultimately, she blamed everything on Nina. She thought, if Nina Sterling just disappeared from the world, she would once again be the person Ethan loved most. So, one evening, Valerie drove a car to the Sterling Corporation building. Valerie must have been truly unhinged. She waited around the Sterling Corporation building for a long time, ready to run Nina over the moment she appeared. In the evening, she finally saw Nina. The first sight of Nina made her eyes turn bloodshot. She madly slammed the accelerator to the floor. But just as the car was about to crush the woman she hated, a figure rushed out and pushed Nina away. That person took the fatal blow for her. The next second after being pushed, Nina heard a loud crash. When she got up and ran to see who had saved her, she saw Ethan lying in a pool of blood. It was a lie to say she wasn't shocked. A crowd quickly gathered, and someone called the police. An ambulance arrived quickly. Ethan was lifted onto a stretcher, but Nina did not go with them. All she could do was call Arthur and his wife to inform them. The driver of the car had just been apprehended. She saw that the crazed person was Valerie, so Nina understood. This had always been a feud between Valerie and Ethan. She should never have been dragged into it in the first place. Inside the hospital, after a frantic rescue effort, Ethan's life was saved. But when he woke up, he was told that his legs were beyond repair and had to be amputated. Ethan reached for his empty pant legs and stared blankly for a long time. He chased everyone out of the room. After a moment of silence, he could no longer hold back and burst into tears. 2 months later, Sterling Corporation's newly developed health supplement was successfully launched and quickly took the middle-aged and elderly market by storm, with sales reaching new highs. This completely resolved the crisis at Sterling Corporation. At the same time, Nina received a second piece of good news. Grandma Sterling had been successfully discharged from the hospital. Her cancer had been a misdiagnosis. Learning this news, Nina finally understood the profound meaning of a false alarm. But amidst the relief, she and Nathan exchanged a look, both understanding what the other was thinking. If that was the case, then this fake marriage, originally intended to make her grandmother happy, was it about to come to an end? So they both started to speak at the same time, but neither could finish. Nina opened her mouth to speak, but Nathan placed a finger on her lips to stop her. He forced a smile and said casually, "I have a class reunion to attend later. Whatever you have to say, tell me when I get back." After Nathan left, Nina stayed at home alone, lost in thought again. She didn't know when it started, but she had gotten used to Nathan's presence in the house. If he really had to leave her one day, she hoped she could prolong their time together just a little longer. She knocked on Nathan's door. It wasn't locked and swung open. Seeing the empty room, she remembered that Nathan was at his class reunion. Just as she was about to turn and leave his room, she saw a diary on his desk. Normally, she had no intention of prying into someone's diary. But the diary was blown open by a breeze, and she saw her own name on the page. Chapter 28, Nina couldn't resist and picked up the diary. After flipping through a couple of pages, she realized something was wrong. She started to flip the diary backward, page by page. When she reached the very first page, her heart was pounding like a drum. She had never thought that in Nathan's heart, he had willingly married her. From the age of 15, when he first understood what love was, his diary was filled with her name. He would wait at her door every morning to go to school together and find different excuses to see her every weekend. Countless times, he had almost been unable to hide the surging emotions in his heart. But he was afraid of being rejected, afraid that in the end, they wouldn't even be friends. So he could only take a step back and maintain their current relationship as closest friends. Later, she fell in love and he went abroad. And then, she was hurt by love, and he took the initiative to ask her parents to beg for a legitimate reason to see her at the airport. On the day at the snow mountain, Nathan had made a pious wish over the candle she had prepared for him. The wish was, "I hope I can have a happy ending with the person I love. If not, then I hope she will be treated with care in her next relationship." Nina couldn't describe the feeling in her heart. There was gratitude and there was heartache. Gratitude for everything he had done for her and for always treating her with care in this fake marriage. And at the same time, heartache that he had kept his feelings hidden so deeply, all by himself. Nina stood there, holding the diary, unable to move for a long time. Just then, her phone rang. It was one of Nathan's friends, saying he had gotten drunk at the reunion and asking her to pick him up. When Nina arrived, Nathan was being supported by a friend, vomiting by the side of the road. She quickly went to help him. Looking up and seeing Nina, Nathan immediately clung to her arm and said loudly, "My wife is here, I'm going home," perhaps because he was drunk. There was a hint of pride in his voice when he said this. Nina helped him into the car, and he curled up in the seat and closed his eyes. He wasn't rowdy or disruptive when drunk, just a bit slow to react. Now he seemed to have fallen asleep. When they got home, Nina found that he really was asleep. She supported him all the way, unlocked the door, and put him on his bed. But just as she was about to leave, he suddenly wrapped his arms around her waist, not letting her go. Nina tried to pull his arms away, but he only held on tighter. In the end, Nathan started to sob, accusingly, "Why do you have to leave? Isn't it good to be with me? Were you not happy being married to me all this time? Can we not get a divorce? Not even when Grandma gets better, not for any reason." Nina was silent for a moment, then couldn't help but run her fingers through his hair. Her voice was gentler than she realized. "Okay, no divorce." The next day, Nathan woke up with a splitting headache. He sat on the bed, holding his head, and thought for a long time. But he couldn't remember how he had left the reunion or how he had gotten home safely. He shook his head, deciding not to think about it. He had gotten drunk yesterday only to escape. To escape the fact that he was about to divorce Nina. But in the end, there was no escaping it, was there? Just then, the bedroom door opened from the outside, and Nina, dressed in a beautiful gown, walked to his bedside. Nathan thought, it's just a divorce. Does she have to be so formal? However, the next second, Nina knelt before him. She solemnly took out a ring and asked him, "Nathan, will you marry me?" Nathan's jaw dropped in shock. He pinched himself hard and, realizing it wasn't a dream, slowly nodded and said yes. A month later, a wedding of the century, which caused a sensation throughout Seaport City, was held at a grand estate. The venue was filled with pure white eustomas, representing eternal love. Guests held champagne glasses, laughing and chatting, offering their sincerest blessings to the newlyweds. But outside the wedding venue, a solitary figure sat in a wheelchair. When Ethan learned of Nina's wedding, he had stubbornly insisted on coming, despite his family's objections. But what was the point of coming? During his time in the hospital, she hadn't visited him once. In his countless moments of collapse and despair, her face was all he could see in his mind. But she didn't come. She really didn't want him anymore. But maybe this was for the best. He didn't want her to see him in his current broken state. Just like now, he could only watch from a distance outside the wedding. Watching the woman who had once given him her whole heart bow her head to exchange wedding rings with another man. Ethan tilted his head back and drained the bottle of liquor. The ground at his feet was littered with empty bottles. From the nearby wedding venue, the MC's voice announced loudly, "The groom may now kiss the bride." The crowd below erupted in enthusiastic cheers. Kiss her, Nina blushed shyly. Nathan looked at the woman before him, the woman he had sworn to protect for the rest of his life. He lowered his head and kissed her deeply.